Well, welcome everybody, and this is another in a series of lectures of me speaking to an empty classroom, lots of empty seats out there. I really wish you were here with me to go over this material, but nonetheless, the show must go on. I wanted to focus today on introductions and conclusions, and one thing that, if you've read the chapter, which is chapter 14 in the 5th edition, of course it's different chapters in different editions, I just wanted to make sure I covered this so that you understood how to organize your informative as well as your persuasive speech. So that's what's nice, is that this structure is going to be consistent with your informative and your persuasive speech. So the introduction is 5 components in my book, okay? In the textbook, it adds another one, and I'll go over that as well. So gain attention is something we've talked about already, and a lot of you have talked about that with your bag speech. What are different ways to gain attention is something I'd ask the class. Well, one of them is ask a question, one of the easiest ways, but wait for an answer. Make sure you let the audience process the question, think about it, and then ask for a response. Another one is tell a short story. It's got to be a short narrative, just because we only have 6 minutes for the informative speech and about 8 to 10 minutes for the persuasive speech. So you don't want to have a 3-minute story to gain your attention. So it's got to be a pretty quick story, maybe a humorous one, depending upon the topic. It could be a startling one, but people generally like the narrative so that they're drawn in. You've probably had a friend say, "Hey, you know what? Let me tell you a story about this weekend. I had a great weekend." And you're all ears if someone tells you that they have a story about something that occurred over the weekend. So that's really the 2 most common ways to gain attention. You can gain attention with a visual aid, as we talked about. You can gain attention with a quotation that's insightful or profound, a rhetorical question, a startling statistic. Sometimes people will start it with a joke. Hopefully it's funny, but it definitely gains attention if it's not funny too. So anyway, first thing you're going to want to do, and then reveal the topic. Don't keep us guessing. We know that sometimes people struggle with listening, so let us know what that topic is right away. And then relate the topic to the audience. Here's where you gain attention, and here's where hopefully you keep it. You explain to them, this is why you should listen to this speech. This is why this speech relates to you, or how this speech relates to you. I have an acronym, another textbook I taught out of, use the acronym, "What's in it for me?" Because once you get up here, or at least, once people are watching your video, or watching you on Zoom, or in the eventuality of us doing this in person, they're going to want to know why your speech is important. Why should they listen to you? What's in it for them? Okay? And so sometimes you have to really tie into something they really care about. So for instance, you might say something like, "Hey, we're all students. We should care about the topic of high tuition costs at the university level." Okay? So you've just related to them, hopefully. Okay? We're all taxpayers. We should care about the amount of taxes that are going to defense, right? Or to the war effort, or wherever these taxes are going. If you pay taxes, you probably care about it. And so that's really what we're looking at. I've heard speeches about human trafficking, and someone would say, we're all humans. We all should care about people suffering. And so these are examples of how you relate the topic to the audience. Why should they care? Is really what you're covering. And so it's probably the most persuasive point in an informative speech, where you're supposed to be neutral. You do want to explain, here, this is how it relates to you. Okay? Now the thesis and the preview are the last 2 parts of the introduction, and I would ask the question, what's the difference? Because a lot of times students think they're synonymous, and I would beg to differ. So the thesis I explain as the goal, the takeaway, the ends to the means of your speech. So at the end of your speech, this is what the main point or the takeaway was. It's the theme. So for instance, if your goal is to inform me in an informative speech, it'd be different than a persuasive speech. So for instance, if your goal is to inform me about the variety of hybrid vehicles out there, for instance, okay? So your thesis might sound something like, at the end of the speech, I would like you to have enough information to inform a purchase of one of the hybrid vehicles we're going to talk about, perhaps, okay? So you're just giving us information. You're helping us with a decision, perhaps. And with obviously the persuasive speech, it'd be very different. At the end of the speech, I want you to understand why you should vote, okay? And to register to vote and to actually vote. So, very different. The preview is the vehicle, the means, okay, to get to the goal, which is the thesis. The vehicle is our three main points. So what are your three main points in the hybrid example, the hybrid car example? So today we're going to talk about the Prius, the Elantra, and the Tesla, right? And so, therefore, you'll be more informed about perhaps a decision to purchase a hybrid vehicle. So, preview is how we get there. The thesis is the goal, okay? The means to the end. Hopefully that's clear. The last thing that your textbook offers, or at least suggests in your introduction, is to gain credibility, immediately gain credibility. So I would say that you're doing this throughout your speech. You're gaining credibility with your source sites. You're gaining credibility with the way you're presenting, whether your delivery, and the structure. Every part of your speech, hopefully, is informing the level of credibility, okay? So I'm not including that as part of your introduction, but keep that in mind, okay? I remember we talked about initial and derived and terminal credibility. And initial being credibility before the speech, derived during the speech, and then of course terminal after the speech. So credibility isn't just in the introduction is really my point, okay? So we're going to skip over the body. We're going to talk about the body and the different ways to, organize and different formats for your informative as well as your persuasive speech. But I want to get to the conclusion because there's three components in the conclusion. Number one, review your main points. Okay, we've discussed the Prius, the Elantra, and the Tesla. Okay, restate the thesis. So hopefully you have enough information, if you're in the market, to make an informed decision. And then end on a note of finality. Thank you very much for your time and listening to this speech. I really appreciate it. And that way you have that closure. A lot of times people will have a wonderful speech throughout the introduction and the body, and maybe they get nervous, or they just, most of the time it's getting nervous, and they kind of end abruptly. And it feels like, okay, you had a really strong speech to this point. Let's get to the closure part, because that's really necessary. So the conclusion, those three components, is in your textbook and most likely on a quiz. The five components are the introduction and the three for the conclusion. If you have any questions, please talk to me. This is how you're going to begin your outline, the formal outline, as well as the outline worksheet with the introduction, these five components, and then end it with these three. Okay? Zoom in or email if you have any questions. Please talk to me. I'm happy to answer them. You can send me drafts of an outline, and I can help wordsmith it and help structure it if you'd like. But please, make sure you ask the questions if you have them. Have a good day.